What's up, y'all? Back again today with a very special video. So today I have a lot on my mind and I'm going to try not to use a lot of your time, but I have a few things that I would like to address. In this video I'm going to title it A Message to All Black People. Now, if you've ever seen a few of my other videos on my channel, a number of my videos are pertaining to race relations in America. This isn't in vain, and I don't just do this frivolously. I honestly make these videos in order to try to bring some type of understanding, a mutual understanding, to black, white, Asian, Latino, every nation that has congregated in America, because when I was younger it was called a melting pot, and supposedly this was the greatest nation because of the diversity in this nation. I've noticed that there's been a lack of acceptance of diversity, so I try to make these videos from a righteous perspective to bring forth understanding to these races in America. Now, I've made a video titled A Message to All White People before, and I got some backlash from so-called white people and Caucasians, and I got some support as well. But this video is titled A Message to All Black People. Now, as I said, I have a number of things in my head floating around and that have been on my spirit lately, and I feel the need to speak on them. I don't have anything written down, so this is all going to be from my soul, my spirit. Now, I am making this video particularly for black people because there's a number of issues that pertain particularly to black people. And when I say so-called black, before I move any further, I would like to put a standard definition to the terms that we're using, because it's important that, as I said, we have a mutual level of understanding. So when I say black, a number of so-called African American people will right off the bat say, well, I'm not black. I'm not black, And this brings me to my first point. The dark-skinned, melanated, so-called African American people in America, that so-called Negro in America, is the only group of people that even has a necessity to call themselves anything else from the nationality than which they originally are. Okay? I'll say that again in more layman's terms, and I'll give you a few examples. I have a few friends from Nigeria, or should I say their parents are from Nigeria. Their heritage is Nigerian, and although they were born here, they refer to themselves as Nigerian. Their parents make them Nigerian food. They speak the languages that are predominant in Nigeria. They know the Nigerian flag. When they get married, they have traditional Nigerian garments. So on and so forth for all of the other nations of the planet. It's only when you get to America, within the construct of the so-called Negro or African American demographic, do you have such dissension and dissociation and disruption of our history for a number of reasons, mainly due to chattel slavery and the harsh, inhumane things that were implemented on us to dissociate us from our families. So a few examples of this is, when we were brought here to America as slaves, the Negro, so-called Negro in America, we were taken away from our families in multiple instances. The families that knew the history of where we came from, we were taken away from that, generation after generation after generation, to where it became impossible to then trace back to our native land, to trace back to any of our native habits or any of the cultural things that were unique to us. So this involves our last names. The Negro in America does not have his own last name. As I've said before, even our greatest people, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, some of our greatest heroes, Martin Luther King, none of these people have the last name of their true forefathers, of their true ancestors. None of these people know the foods that we originally ate before we were made to be enslaved. None of these people know the traditional garments. Okay? None of these people know our original spirituality. So this is why I say, and I've said before, and I will continue to say, that the so-called Negro, the so-called black in America, is the most dissociated from his history. And this has a number of negative side effects, as we see in the so-called hoods and ghettos around the world. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on the history, but I did want to put a little backstory there for you to understand where I'm going. So this is why I call myself black. If I had a choice, believe me, I would call myself something different. I would refer to myself as the nation in which I originally came from. But I can't call myself African, okay? Because first of all, Africa is a continent, and there's many countries within that continent. Again, people from Africa that I know do not call themselves African. They refer to themselves as the country in which they originally come from. And as I've already stated to you, it is impossible for me and many others in America to do that. So this is why I call myself black. Now, many people will say, I'm not black, I'm African American. Other people will say, I'm not black, I'm a Negro. Other people will say, I'm not black, I'm colored. Other people will say, I'm not black, I'm just melanated. Okay? Other people will say, yes, I'm African, or any of the different labels that we've placed on ourselves. But I want to say, and I wanted to let it be known, that if you look up the definition for the word black, it simply means absorbed with light. I'll say this one more time for clarification purposes. If you Google right now the word black, the definition of black, or if you look in the Oxford Dictionary or many other dictionaries, obviously every word has multiple meanings, okay? But one of the first meanings, the predominant meaning of black is the darkest shade or the darkest hue available due to the complete absorption of light. I'll say it again. The word black is defined as the darkest shade in the entire spectrum due to the complete absorption of light. So what that means in layman's terms is if you say that you're black, you can rightfully say so because you are the darkest shade available due to the complete absorption of light. And what we know light to be, the first original source of light is the sun. So when we equate that to our melanin, which is also a light absorber, we can then denote that our melanin, our dark shade of melanin, is due to the complete absorption of the light that we are receiving from the sun. We are completely absorbed with this light that comes from the sun. Therefore, we are deemed and considered rightfully black. Now, I've gone into this before, and I'm going to go into this at a different time. But I always like to let that be known periodically so that we can understand the words that we use, because there's been a certain amount of associations that have been placed on the word black, black male, black magic. We can't cross paths with the black cat. So subconsciously, we have been implanted with the idea that the word black is negative because of the associations. But it's always important that we understand definitions because language is important. Now, I know that took a little while, but I needed to lay that foundation for all the black people that are watching. And again, this is a message to black people. So if you are not black and you're watching this, I'm not going to tell you to turn it off, because I want you to gain understanding, a mutual level of understanding. But you must understand that this is a message for black people, melanated, absorbed with light people. So if you are not willing to understand, or if you're willfully ignorant, I cannot help you, and I'm not going to argue with you. I've had actually one person, before I go deep into my message, and I'm not going to take too much of your time, but I need you to understand what's on my mind. I've had one person particularly that has made 10 different profiles on YouTube in order to try to, what they call, troll or insult me or detract from my message. This same person, I've blocked them 10 different times. And every time they continue to make a new profile in order to comment on my videos and tell me I'm pathetic, I'm sad, I'm just completely just disrespectful, and I'm racist because I speak about race relations in America. And I'm not upset at this person, but I find it a little strange that the same people that constantly comment on my videos telling me that I'm racist or that I'm pathetic for speaking about race relations in America, I can almost 100% bet that they don't go on the channels of the white supremacists that are on YouTube, and they don't tell them that they're sad and they're pathetic and that they're wrong for being white supremacists and speaking negatively about black people. So this is one of my first points, is that black people, don't be detracted, dismayed, or just disrupted by these quote-unquote trolls who come and try to tell you that you're wrong for trying to speak about issues that pertain to black people. Because again, there's been a number of things that have happened to black people particularly that we need to speak about. Now this brings me to my second point. The Black Lives Matter issue. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'll go into it slightly. We understand that there's a group called Black Lives Matter, and if you watch one of my videos, I have titled "Fuck Black Lives Matter, Fuck White Lives Matter." I went into detail on how the organization that labels themselves Black Lives Matter has been funded by a non-black person in order to create dissension and further the tensions and the racial animosities in America. And I'm not going to go into that. However, I will say that yes, black lives do matter. And it's important to note that, because every time someone says Black Lives Matter, then there's another detractor on the opposing end that says all lives matter. And this is, again, my second point. Yes, we understand that all lives matter, but to this person who says all lives matter, I would like to pose something to you. Was it all lives that were hanging from trees such as this and dismembered and had their penises and their extremities cut off? Was it all lives that were made to drink from a separate water fountain? Was it all lives that were made to get to the back of the bus? Was it all lives that had German shepherds sicked on them? Was it all lives that had water hoses sprayed on them for peacefully protesting? Was it all lives that had laws made into which they could not intermarry? Was it all lives that had their babies thrown to alligators? Was it all lives? It was not all lives. It was black lives particularly and only that went through these things. Was it all lives that had their names changed to the names of their oppressor? Was it all lives that were not allowed to practice their original spirituality and religion? Was it all lives that were not allowed to speak their native tongue? Was it? No, it was black lives. So when we say Black Lives Matter, we're trying to embrace the fact that in spite of all these things that were done to only black lives, those same black lives do matter. And we're not saying they matter more than yours. We're saying they matter just as much as yours. Because again, your life has not been taken and your life has not been oppressed in the same fashion or nearly the same fashion as a black life. So I will continue to say Black Lives Matter, and I will continue to say that the organization titled Black Lives Matter is a pseudo-organization. It's important to note. Now, my third point, because I told you I have a lot on my mind today, I want to talk about a few current events. Now, we're familiar with the Flint, Michigan, the city of Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis that's been going on in Flint, Michigan, okay? And if you're not aware, there is a city called Flint in the state called Michigan, and this particular city is inhabited by mostly low-income minority and black people. This city has been affected by a water crisis that has made their water unsafe to drink and poisonous for a number of years now. Now, it was recently found out that a number of government officials in the city of Flint, Michigan have been charged with manslaughter because they knowingly let poisonous water go into the city of Flint, Michigan. Again, a city that is inhabited by mostly black people, and low-income black people at that. Now, this is important to remember, that these government officials, these people who have been sworn to protect and serve us to the best of their ability, have been charged for knowingly disseminating poisonous water to black people. Again, not all lives were affected by this water crisis. It was the black and disenfranchised lives that were affected by this poisonous water. So much so that more than 10 people have died from the effects of this water, including an 84-year-old man, and a number of children and elderly women and other people have been conversely affected by this water crisis. The reason why I bring this up is just this morning, I read about, or should I say I heard, how Steve Harvey, who is a radio host, a talk show personality, a quote-unquote comedian, he was on his radio show and he had a caller from Flint, Michigan, the place who was affected by this water crisis. And again, people died, black people died from this water crisis. Steve Harvey was heard telling this caller to enjoy his nice brown glass of water. And I guess he assumed that that would be somehow funny. But now I've also made a video about how Steve Harvey had a meeting with Donald Trump, and supposedly and allegedly he was discussing going to the inner cities and the low-income neighborhoods to try to fix violence and to try to fix other issues in low-income neighborhoods. But listen, but how ironic is it that a man that's meeting with Donald Trump to try to go into inner cities allegedly to help the inner cities is also joking about those same inner cities having poisonous water to drink, and people who have died from that, I doubt that they would find that funny. Now, I'm not going to go in on Steve Harvey because he's already gone in on himself with that Velcro mustache he has on his face. But what I want to say is, we as a black people, because again, this is a message to all black, melanated, absorbed with light people, we have to stand for something. Because there's a popular saying, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. It is time to stand up for righteousness. Enough with the foolishness and enough with the games. And this isn't to belittle or disrespect any of my fellow black people. But I find far too often that we're not standing up when we need to. Because if you remember back in the 60s, when they didn't like something, whether people liked it or not, they boycotted it. If they decided, they all got together and they boycotted it. This is how Rosa Parks became famous, because she was one of the leading people in this boycott against the bus systems, to where they said, you know what, we'll rather walk than to ride your buses and pay you to tell me to get in the back of the bus. But now in 2017, we're so comfortable with our air conditions and our Xboxes, our PlayStations, and our tablets and our cell phones that we feel as though we're comfortable enough. We have enough freedom. We have enough liberties. And then when there's blatant instances like the Steve Harvey making fun of us, or the Flint, Michigan government officials who've been charged with manslaughter for intentionally poisoning us, we turn the other cheek and we watch Love and Hip Hop, or we watch the NBA Finals. And again, I've been a part of this issue before, but there comes a time when we need to stand up for something. And again, we need to have teachers and leaders. This is my other point. Anytime a black person comes out and says, I would like to be a teacher or a leader for the community, there's a number of black people who gather to say, who are you? Who do you think you are? We don't need a teacher. We don't need a leader. Yet these same people send their children to school from kindergarten to 12th grade at least, where they have at least 15 to 20 teachers. Because by the time you get to 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, you have first period, second period, third period. You have multiple teachers. So what I'm saying is, why is it that black people, as this white person's looking at me right now, why is it that black people do not have leaders and are not comfortable with having teachers, but they're comfortable with sending their children to the teachers, the non-black teachers in the school institutions? To teach simply means to disseminate information that is previously unknown. So if I stand here as a black man and say, I would like to be a teacher for the community, why would you disrespect me and demean me for doing such if I've done the research that has not been taught in school, and I just simply wanted to disseminate information to you that you previously did not know? Wouldn't that make me a righteous teacher? Shouldn't we embrace people who are willing to lead and teach, such as Malcolm X, such as Marcus Garvey, such as Huey Newton, such as Martin Luther King, such as Tupac Shakur? Because leaders and teachers come in different forms, and yes, they have their downfalls, and yes, they have their negative habits that they should shed, but we're all works in progress. But if they're willing to sacrifice, because we know it takes sacrifice to be a black leader and a black teacher in the community. We know, we've seen every black person who has stood out and put their neck out to sacrifice and teach this information that is not popular. We know what happened to them. We see what happened to a person like Marcus Garvey. We see what happened to a person like Malcolm X, who was shot and killed. We see what happened to a person like Martin Luther King, who was shot and killed. We see what happens to these teachers, so why shouldn't we embrace someone such as myself who is willing to die for this cause and not just talk? I'm not just talking. This is by me speaking this information to you, I'm putting my neck on the line because I've received numerous threats, and I'm putting my face out there. Unlike these trolls who come on my comment section, I'm putting my face out there, and I'm telling you, I'm standing in Houston, Texas, if you want to come and see me. Any white supremacist that wants to come and see me, you can definitely come and see me in Houston, Texas. Name the place, the time, and I will be there. But furthermore, shouldn't we as a black people embrace someone such as myself and others who are willing to righteously stand for the cause? So, that is my other point. Moving forward, before I get too turned up, because I'm already feeling it, I want to stay in an educational mode. One of the other points that I wanted to bring to you before I end this video was two things. One, there's a movie that's coming out called The Black Panther, and there was recently the trailer, which is a snippet of the movie, a preview of the theatrical movie, came out. And this is a Marvel Comics movie, which is a superhero movie, and it includes a predominantly black cast, and it's about a black superhero. And I've seen there's a number of supporters for the film, and a lot of people are hyped about it, but I wanted to just bring you my particular perspective. Now, I'm not going to be a pessimist, and I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer and start talking about, oh, we shouldn't da-da-da-da-da. No, I support any predominantly black movie because there's not many out there, but I wanted to bring you a perspective that maybe you may not have evaluated before. If you notice with black movies such as superhero movies and the like, why is it that we're so content and happy and celebratory in spite of all the negative things that are happening in real life? Because this superhero movie is not real life. But in real life, we're being shot and killed on the streets. We're being labeled as thugs and baby mamas and baby daddies and ghetto degenerates. That's real life. But when a Hollywood production comes out with an all-black cast or predominantly black cast, we seem to just throw all our cares in the wind and forget about the real things that's going on. But I wanted to give you this thing to notice about. If you look at Disney movies, for years in Disney movies, there was only white princesses, correct? Snow White, Cinderella, right? There's Tinkerbell. The list could go on and on and on. It wasn't until they started making films like Pocahontas, where they brought in a Native American, and they brought that demographic. Then they brought out Mulan, and they brought in the Asian demographic, right? They brought out all these other movies, and then they finally, maybe barely 10 years ago, gave us The Princess and the Frog, a black princess. Finally, finally, and we celebrated so much because finally, after nearly 100 years, Disney decided, let's give these black people some representation. This is what I want you to notice. It's similar to this Black Panther movie. We've had Superman, we've had Iron Man, we've had Spider-Man, we've had Batman, we've had Aquaman, we've even had Wonder Woman. And now, finally, they give us one predominantly black movie and we celebrate. We just celebrate. But furthermore, I want you to notice this one thing. So if you saw that picture, yes, you read it right. There's a number of critics who saw this predominantly black movie with a black superhero, and a number of critics have come out and said that this movie is too black and too militant. Now, this is my other point that I wanted to show you, the hypocrisy, the deep hypocrisy of America. I almost want to change the name of my channel to the hypocrisy of America, because this is why I started making my channel. This is what most of my videos are surrounded around. The ironic, disrespectful, almost poetic hypocrisy of America. Okay? Because when there's all white movies like Spider-Man and Batman and Superman and all these other predominantly white movies, nobody is allowed to come out and say, oh, this is too white. It's too white. But more importantly than the fact that they said that the film is too black, because let's be honest, we expected that. But is the fact that these critics said that this film is too militant. Militant being the deep hypocrisy there. Now, why is it hypocritical to say that this film is militant? Well, if you notice, the word that's been used, the militant word that's been used, has been used before. The militant word has been used to demean people like Malcolm X and and Huey Newton, who is actually the original Black Panthers. Because I also want to let it be known that while we're celebrating them making this Black Panther superhero movie, we should be demanding that they make the real Black Panther biopic, and that they show the counterintelligence program, which is the government agency who infiltrated the Black Panther organization and killed people like Huey Newton. We need to see that movie. We need to see that Black Panther movie, the actual realistic Black Panther movie, right? With Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, to show us the people who took up arms to defend our neighborhood against police brutality. But no. We don't want that Black Panther movie. We want the superhero Black Panther movie, but even that is too militant. But this is why it's hypocritical. Because when you use words like militant to describe people like Malcolm X and Huey Newton, and even this new Black Panther movie, don't we support our military? Aren't we constantly saluting our military? And aren't there millions of dollars worth of support and donations and commercials and marketing that distributes to uplifting the military, the United States military? So the same people who are saying we don't like black militancy, they're saying they support Caucasian and Americanized militancy. How hypocritical is that? And why is it threatening to have black militancy, and why should we support so-called white militancy? Well, I'll tell you why. Because by the very nature of the word militancy, military means a structured organization, a structured group of people who are meant to fight, who are meant to gather in order to conquer, in order to secede, right? So, why is it threatening to have a black military? Because by the very definition and by the very nature, a black military would be going against their oppressor, their enemy. And the same people who are threatened by a black military understand that black people's open enemy is, yes, you guessed it, the so-called white people who have oppressed us. And this isn't by our nature. This isn't by what we decided. This is by the fact that America was based and founded upon the blood, sweat, and tears of black melanated people. So this is why a black military is completely out of order. It's completely out of whack, and we have people just going against it. But at the same time, I'm supposed to salute the people who fight for the American military. And this isn't to demean them, because they're doing what they feel like they need to do to battle whatever they feel oppression is. But why is it that when black people gather together to be quote unquote militant, that's not supported in the same nature? I need you to answer that for me, troll, especially the troll who's made 10 different comments. Tell me why we should support the American military, but we shouldn't support a black military. And tell me that I'm wrong in my assumption that a black military, by its very nature, means that they have to fight their oppressor, and you know exactly who that oppressor is. So of course I didn't want to take too much of your time, but I wanted to let you see some of the dynamics of the covert, subtle forms of psychological warfare, right? And reverse psychology that they use on us in order to keep us subdued and oppressed. Because again, I would much rather be an actual slave with chains on my wrist and in the 60s or at least in the 60s when they told us to get to the back of the bus, because at least if they were still saying Negro only and get to the back of the bus and they were openly calling us niggers, at least at that time could we come together as black people and say, you know what? They are making themselves our open enemy, and we do not appreciate this, and we need to do something about it, which they did. But in 2017, the forms of warfare are very subtle, and they don't openly call you nigger. They don't openly say you can't go here, but there is still places in which you are looked at very strangely, and they call the police on you when you go there. So would you not say that's very similar to just saying no niggers here? So this is why I need you to understand. There's deep forms of psychological warfare that's placed on us, and we need to stand up and we need to embrace any black man or woman who's willing to stick their neck out to teach this truth. Because again, warfare is not just physical, and combat is not just physical. Combat is psychological, it's spiritual, right? It's a mental game before it becomes physical. And many wars are fought with ever even shedding one drop of blood. But only the true warriors will understand that. And the last thing I have to say before I go is, black people, I need you to embrace yourself. I'm going to tell you a quick story before I get out of here. And I know I told you I wasn't going to take too much time, but this is it right here. I had a job interview recently to get a better job at this high-end place. And I presented myself very nicely. Went and got me a nice pressed shirt, a nice new tie, and cleaned up myself, and I went to this interview. I filled out the application, I did the assessment test, I passed it with flying colors. I had my first interview. It went great, it went grand. I was in their face and smiling, and it went great. They sent me on to the second interview. I talked to another manager, a higher up manager. It went great. They said, wow, we really like you, we want to put you on a third interview. Which I understand, hey, it's a process. But now this is what I want to tell you. They set up an interview with me, with one of the owners of the company, I assume, for a third interview. And this interview was not face-to-face. This interview was just like I'm having with you. It was on a tablet. It was on an app where you have to have a video conference. And so it was a Caucasian gentleman, because again, every single job that I've ever applied for or that I've ever had, I've always had to go to a Caucasian gentleman or a woman, but mainly a blue-eyed or green-eyed Caucasian so-called white man who has to look me up and down before he decides, because that's what it happens. He has to decide if I can get this job or not. And it's not, and many times it's not about my qualification, because I have 6+ years of experience in the field that I applied for. And I'm very highly qualified in that position. So this gentleman had a on-call interview with me, a third interview, mind you. I went through 2 other high-up managers, and they approved me for the third interview. This man looked me up and down on video conference, and he just basically skimmed through the interview and went straight to talking about my hair being an issue. And this is where I want to show you my hair, okay? This is what my hair looks like. Yes, I didn't go like this, but I had freshly twisted my hair. I put a band on it to tie it back, and I had my tie on. but very professional, using large words. And do you know what the gentleman told me? He told me that my hair was an issue. And this is what I wanted to tell you. Black people, I know we have to quote unquote play this game and assimilate to a certain degree, but I want to tell you to be proud of who you are. That includes wearing your natural hair. That includes being proud of your history, being proud of your skin, and knowing what black means, and knowing that black is not a curse, despite the fact that we are in the land of our open enemy who is openly oppressing us and doing submersive things to keep us down. I need you to understand that you are a beautiful black being, and I love you, and you have love out here. Do not carry your shoulders around, and do not be depressed out here, because they know that's gonna kill you. And remember, black don't crack. Remember, I love you, and please vibrate higher.